He was just a quiet single dad working as a security guard at an upscale corporate event until armed intruders stormed the penthouse and he caught a falling CEO on a balcony ledge. She froze the moment she saw the Delta Force tattoo on his forearm. The entire ballroom went silent. And what happened next? No one saw coming. If you believe in hidden heroes, unexpected courage, and the power of second chances, you're in the right place. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Moment Story so you never miss another tale that might just restore your faith in humanity. This is a story about a man who left the shadows of war to raise his young one in peace, only to find himself thrust back into action when evil knocked on the door. And the woman he saved? She held the key to a past he thought he'd buried forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 42nd floor of Sterling Plaza, revealing a world most people only saw in magazines. Crystal chandeliers scattered light like diamonds across polished marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Belmont Heights skyline, where the city stretched endlessly into the autumn dusk, its lights beginning to flicker awake like stars coming to life. Dean Foster stepped out of the elevator, his black security uniform pressed and crisp, his posture still carrying the ghost of years spent standing at attention. At 41, his frame had softened just enough at the edges to make him approachable, though anyone who looked closely could see the discipline in how he moved, deliberate, aware, like a man trained to scan every corner of a room before he even realized he was doing it. His dark hair, now streaked with silver at the temples, was cut short and neat. His hands, calloused and strong, rested naturally at his sides. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Deep brown, calm and steady, they carried the weight of things he would never talk about. Wars fought in deserts half a world away. Brothers lost. Nights that stretched longer than any calendar could measure. He clipped his security badge to his chest pocket and glanced at his watch. 6:15. North Point Corporate Gala was scheduled to begin at 7, which meant he had 45 minutes to walk the perimeter, check the balcony access points, and make sure every exit was clear. The event coordinator, a sharp woman named Lily Daniels, had made it very clear this was the most important night of the year for North Point Enterprises. Over 300 executives, investors, and VIPs would be gathering in the grand ballroom to celebrate the company's record-breaking quarter. Dean's job was simple: stay invisible, keep people safe, go home. He preferred it that way. The ballroom was already bustling with staff. Waiters in crisp white jackets arranged champagne flutes on silver trays. A string quartet tuned their instruments near the stage. Floral arrangements taller than most people lined the walls, bursting with white roses and deep green ivy. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. Dean walked the perimeter slowly, his eyes moving from the kitchen entrance to the balcony doors, from the main entrance to the service hallway. He made mental notes. 2 exits on the north side, 1 on the south. Balcony accessible but locked until later in the evening. Security cameras positioned at each corner. Good sight lines. Everything checked out. As he passed by a long hallway leading toward the executive suites, his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and smiled when he saw the name on the screen. "Hey kiddo," he answered quietly. "Daddy, did you remember to pack my lunch for tomorrow?" The voice on the other end was bright, full of energy that could power entire cities. "Already in the fridge," Dean said. "Turkey sandwich, apple slices, and those little pretzels you like. The ones shaped like knots?" "The very same. You're the best." Dean's chest tightened in that familiar way it always did when she said things like that. His daughter, Avery, was 9 years old and the only reason he got out of bed most mornings. After the war, after the fire that had taken more than just his skin. After the nightmares that made sleep feel like a battlefield all over again. She was the light that kept him tethered to the world. "Mrs. Calloway said I can read my essay to the class on Friday," Avery continued, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "It's about people who are brave even when no one's watching." Dean stopped walking. He leaned against the wall, his hand tightening slightly around the phone. "That sounds like a good essay," he said softly. "I wrote about you." He closed his eyes for a moment. "Avery." "I didn't use your name," she said quickly. "I just said there's someone I know who saves people even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Even when no one says thank you." Dean swallowed hard. "You're gonna make me cry at work, kiddo." She giggled. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be you." "Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you more." The line went quiet. Dean slipped the phone back into his pocket and stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. Then he straightened his shoulders and continued his rounds. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom had transformed. Guests arrived in waves, dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns that probably cost more than Dean made in 6 months. Laughter and conversation filled the air, mixing with the soft melodies of the string quartet. Champagne flowed. Cameras flashed. It was a world Dean didn't belong to, and he was fine with that. He positioned himself near the balcony doors, hands clasped in front of him, eyes scanning the crowd. Most security guards tried to look intimidating. Dean just tried to blend in. Be present but not intrusive. Watch without staring. A woman in an emerald green gown passed by him, trailing the scent of expensive perfume. A man in a tailored suit laughed too loudly at his own joke. A waiter nearly tripped over someone's tray but caught himself just in time. Dean noticed it all. Then, near the far side of the ballroom, the crowd shifted. A ripple of attention moved through the room like wind through wheat. Dean followed the movement with his eyes. That's when he saw her, Emily Johnson. She walked into the ballroom like she owned it, which, in a way, she did. As the CEO of North Point Enterprises, Emily had built an empire from the ground up. Forbes had called her a visionary. Business Weekly had named her Executive of the Year, but what struck Dean wasn't her reputation. It was the way she carried herself, confident but not arrogant, graceful but grounded. She wore a sleek black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple twist. Her blue eyes scanned the room the way Dean's did, like someone always aware of her surroundings. She smiled and shook hands as people approached her, but Dean noticed something others might have missed. The smile didn't quite reach her eyes. There was tension in her shoulders, a tightness in her jaw. Something was wrong. Dean filed the observation away and kept watching. As the evening progressed, speeches were made. Awards were handed out. Champagne glasses clinked in endless toasts. The energy in the room was electric, celebratory. But Dean's instincts, honed over years in places where celebrations could turn deadly in seconds, kept him alert. Around 9 o'clock, Lily Daniels, the event coordinator, approached him with a clipboard in hand. "Mr. Foster, we're going to open the balcony in about 10 minutes for guests who want fresh air and photos. Can you make sure it's clear?" "Already checked it twice," Dean said. "But I'll do it again." "Thank you. You've been wonderful tonight." Dean nodded and made his way toward the balcony doors. He unlocked them quietly and stepped outside. The night air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint hum of the city below. The balcony wrapped around the entire south side of the building, offering a breathtaking view of Belmont Heights. Lights stretched out in every direction, and the distant sound of traffic hummed like a lullaby. Dean walked the perimeter, checking the railings, making sure nothing was out of place. Everything looked fine. He turned to head back inside when he heard it. A voice, low, urgent. "I told you, I need more time." Dean froze. The voice came from around the corner, just out of sight. He moved silently, instinct taking over. When he peered around the edge, he saw her. Emily Johnson stood alone, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gripping the railing tightly. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not doing this tonight." We agreed. There was a pause. Then her face changed. The color drained from her cheeks. "That's not possible," she whispered. "You're lying." Dean's pulse quickened. Something was very wrong. Emily looked up suddenly, her eyes locking onto Dean's. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then she lowered the phone slowly, her hand trembling. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, her voice tight. "Just now," Dean said calmly. "I was checking the perimeter." "Are you all right, ma'am?" She stared at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then she shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think I am." Dean took a single step closer, but kept his distance, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. Years of training had taught him how to approach someone in distress without making them feel cornered. "Do you need me to call someone?" he asked gently. "Security? The police?" Emily Johnson looked at him with those sharp blue eyes, and for a moment, Dean saw something he recognized. Fear. Real fear. Not the kind that comes from a bad meeting or a stock dip. The kind that comes from knowing you're in danger. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, the sound of shattering glass erupted from inside the ballroom. Dean's body reacted before his mind caught up. He turned toward the doors, every muscle tensing, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there anymore. He didn't carry a gun. Not since he left the service. But his body still remembered. Screams followed the crash. Then shouting. Then chaos. "Stay behind me," Dean said sharply, positioning himself between Emily and the ballroom entrance. Through the glass doors, Dean could see figures moving quickly. 3 men, maybe 4, dressed in dark clothing, faces covered. They weren't guests. They moved with purpose, with coordination. One of them grabbed a woman by the arm and shoved her toward the center of the room. Another smashed a champagne bottle against a table, sending shards of glass flying. Everyone on the ground. One of them shouted, his voice distorted by a mask. "Phones out. Jewelry off, now." This wasn't random. This was planned. Dean's mind raced through his options. He was unarmed, outnumbered, trapped on a balcony 42 floors above the street. His primary objective was clear: protect the principal. In this case, Emily Johnson. "We need to move," Dean said quietly, turning back to Emily. "Is there another way off this balcony?" Emily's face had gone pale, but her voice was steady. "There's a service ladder on the east side. It leads down to the 41st floor. Maintenance access. Show me." They moved quickly along the balcony's edge, staying low, staying quiet. Dean kept his body between Emily and the ballroom doors, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Behind them, the shouting inside grew louder. More glass shattered. Someone was crying. Dean's jaw tightened. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to go back inside, to help those people. But he couldn't. Not without a weapon. Not without backup. And not without ensuring Emily was safe first. That they reached the east corner of the balcony. Sure enough, a metal ladder was bolted to the building's exterior, leading down to a maintenance platform 1 floor below. "Can you climb in that dress?" Dean asked. Emily kicked off her heels without hesitation. "I can now." Dean almost smiled, almost. "I'll go first," he said. "Stay close behind me. Don't look down." He swung his leg over the railing and tested the ladder. It was solid. Cold metal bit into his palms as he descended quickly, his movements efficient despite the height. When he reached the platform below, he looked up. "Your turn. I've got you." Emily didn't hesitate. She gathered her dress in one hand and climbed over the railing with surprising grace. As she descended, Dean kept one hand on the ladder below her, ready to catch her if she slipped. She didn't. When her bare feet touched the platform, she exhaled shakily. "I hate heights." "You just climbed down a skyscraper in a ball gown," Dean said. "I'd say you're doing fine." A small, tight smile flickered across her face. "What now?" Dean moved to the maintenance door and tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back, assessed the frame, then drove his shoulder into it hard. Once, twice, on the third hit, the lock gave way and the door swung open. Inside, quickly, they stepped into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of concrete and disinfectant. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Dean pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "This is Dean Foster, security contractor at Sterling Plaza. We have an active hostage situation on the 42nd floor. Multiple armed intruders. Unknown number of hostages. I have one VIP secured on the 41st floor. We need police and SWAT immediately." The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. "Units are already en route, sir. Received multiple calls. Stay where you are. Do not engage. Understood." Dean ended the call and turned to Emily. "Help is coming. We need to find somewhere defensible to wait." "There's a break room at the end of this hall," Emily said. "It locks from the inside." They moved quickly down the corridor. Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Heavy. Fast. Someone was coming. "Run," Dean said. They sprinted toward the break room. Dean yanked the door open, shoved Emily inside, and slammed it shut behind them. He twisted the lock and dragged the heavy table in front of the door. "Get down," he whispered. "Away from the door." Emily crouched behind a row of lockers, her breathing quick but controlled. Dean positioned himself near the door, listening. The footsteps grew louder, closer, then they stopped. Right outside the door, Dean's heart hammered in his chest, but his hands were steady. Whoever was on the other side tried the handle. Once, twice, then silence. A voice spoke, muffled but audible. "She's not here. Check the east stairwell." The footsteps retreated. Dean waited a full 30 seconds before he moved. He turned to Emily, who was still crouched behind the lockers, her arms wrapped around her knees. "They're looking for you specifically," Dean said quietly. "This wasn't a random robbery." Emily's face was unreadable. "I know. Who are they?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I can't tell you that. With all due respect, ma'am, I just saved your life. If there's something I need to know to keep you alive until the police get here, now's the time to share." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood, brushing off her dress even though it was already ruined. 3 months ago, she began slowly, my company won a contract to build a security platform for government communications. High-level encryption. Classified data protection. It's worth billions. Dean's expression didn't change. "Go on. There were other bidders. Companies that didn't take losing well. One of them, a firm called Obsidian Solutions, has connections to people who don't play by the rules. You're saying they sent armed men to kidnap you at a corporate gala? I'm saying someone wants me dead or wants me to disappear long enough for that contract to fall apart." Emily's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "And they're not going to stop." Dean absorbed this information quickly. Corporate espionage turned violent. High-stakes contracts. Enemies with resources and reach. This was bigger than a simple security job. "How much does your security detail know about this threat?" Dean asked. "I have a full team," Emily said. "But they're upstairs. Probably dead or hostage by now." Dean's jaw tightened. Then it's just me. You're a security guard at a corporate event, Emily said, not unkindly. This isn't your fight. Dean looked at her directly, his brown eyes steady and calm. Ma'am, with respect, you don't know what my fights look like. Before Emily could respond, the lights went out. The entire floor plunged into darkness, save for the faint red glow of emergency exit signs. Dean moved immediately, positioning himself between Emily and the door. They cut the power, he whispered. They're trying to flush us out. What do we do? Dean's mind worked through scenarios. Police were coming, but they'd need time to assess, to plan, to deploy. That could take 15 minutes. Maybe more. In that time, these men would sweep every floor, every room. We move, Dean said. Stay close to me. No matter what happens, you don't leave my side. Okay. Dean removed the table from the door as quietly as possible and unlocked it. He pressed his ear against the wood. Listening, nothing. He opened the door a crack and peered out. The hallway was empty, dark, silent. Too silent. They stepped out into the corridor, Dean leading, Emily close behind. He moved like a ghost, his footsteps silent, his breathing controlled. Every few feet, he paused to listen. They were halfway to the stairwell when Dean heard it. The soft scrape of a boot on concrete. Coming from behind them, he grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her into an alcove, just as a beam of light swept down the hallway. A flashlight. Attached to a rifle, one of the intruders was hunting them. Dean's pulse remained steady. This was familiar territory. The darkness. The threat. The mission. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The man with the rifle moved slowly down the hall, his light sweeping side to side. He was 10 feet away. Then 5. Dean waited. 3 feet. Then he moved. Dean exploded from the alcove like a coiled spring released. His movements were precise, efficient, brutal. He grabbed the rifle barrel with his left hand and yanked it upward while driving his right elbow into the masked man's throat. The attacker made a choked gagging sound and stumbled backward. Dean twisted the rifle free and reversed it in one fluid motion, slamming the stock into the man's temple. He dropped like a stone. The entire exchange took 3 seconds. Emily stared at Dean, her eyes wide in the darkness. The man who had been politely checking balcony railings 20 minutes ago had just disarmed and neutralized an armed assailant with the kind of speed and precision that didn't come from weekend self-defense classes. Dean quickly searched the unconscious man. He found zip ties, a radio, and a sidearm. He took all 3 and clipped the radio to his belt, keeping the volume low. We need to keep moving, Dean said quietly, his voice calm despite what had just happened. Can you walk? Emily nodded, still processing what she'd witnessed. Who are you? Someone who knows how to handle this, Dean said. That was all he offered. They moved toward the emergency stairwell, Dean now armed and even more alert. As they reached the door, the radio on Dean's belt crackled to life. Sector 3 clear. No sign of the target. 3 clear. No sign of the target. Another voice responded. Copy that. Sector 4 checking floors 39 through 41. Someone saw them on the balcony. She couldn't have gone far. A third voice, deeper and more authoritative, cut in. We're running out of time. Police response is 6 minutes out. Find her and extract now, or we abort. Dean looked at Emily. They're coordinating a full sweep. We can't stay in the stairwell. They'll bottle us in. Then where do we go? Dean's mind raced through the building's layout. 41st floor. Maintenance level. Limited exits. But there was one place they might not think to look immediately. The executive suites, Dean said. Your office. Is it on this floor? No, 43rd floor. But there's a conference room on this level that connects to a private elevator. It goes directly to the executive parking garage. That's our exit. Show me. They moved quickly through the darkened corridors, using emergency lighting to navigate. The building felt like a maze in the dark, but Emily knew it well. She led them past storage rooms and utility closets until they reached a set of frosted glass doors. "Through here," she whispered. Dean tried the door. Locked, but these were standard office locks. He pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket and worked the mechanism. Within seconds, it clicked open. The conference room was large and modern, with a long table surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that would have been breathtaking if they weren't running for their lives. At the far end of the room, a private elevator gleamed in the dim light. Dean moved to the elevator and pressed the call button. Nothing happened. "The power's out," Emily said. "The elevator won't work." Dean examined the panel. Emergency power should keep essential systems running. This should work. He pried open the panel and examined the wiring inside. Years of training in the field, where mechanical failures could mean death, had taught him how to improvise. He crossed two wires, and the elevator hummed to life. The doors opened with a soft ding that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. "Get in," Dean said. Emily stepped inside. Dean followed, but just as the doors began to close, the conference room door burst open. Two armed men in tactical gear stormed in, their rifles raised. Dean's body moved on instinct. He shoved Emily to the floor of the elevator and raised the pistol he'd taken from the first attacker. "Federal agent!" One of the men shouted. "Drop your weapon." Dean's finger tightened on the trigger, but something made him pause. The vests. The patches. The weapons. These weren't mercenaries or corporate thugs. They were law enforcement. "I'm private security," Dean called out, lowering his weapon slightly, but not dropping it. "The woman I'm protecting is Emily Johnson, CEO of North Point Enterprises. There are hostile actors in this building actively hunting her." The lead officer didn't lower his rifle. "Drop the weapon. Now, I won't ask again." Dean looked at Emily, then back at the officers. Slowly, carefully, he set the pistol on the elevator floor and raised his hands. "My name is Dean Foster," he said calmly. "I'm contracted security for tonight's event. Check your briefing. Emily Johnson is the target of an active kidnapping attempt." The second officer spoke into his radio. "Command, we have a male subject claiming to be private security, armed, in the executive conference room with a female matching the CEO's description." A moment passed. Then the radio crackled back. "Confirmed. Dean Foster is on the security roster. Emily Johnson is a priority. Protect. Secure them both and escort to the command post." The lead officer finally lowered his weapon. "Sorry about that, Mr. Foster. Things are chaotic up here. Are either of you injured?" "We're fine," Dean said. "But there are at least 4 hostiles still in the building. One is unconscious on the 41st floor maintenance corridor. The others are armed and coordinating on radio frequency." He unclipped the radio from his belt and handed it to the officer, who took it with a nod of approval. "Good work. We've got SWAT on site now. The building is locked down. You two need to come with us." Dean helped Emily to her feet. She was still barefoot, her dress torn at the hem, but her composure was remarkable. As they followed the officers down a secure corridor, she stayed close to Dean. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." Dean nodded but didn't respond. His mind was still in combat mode, still scanning for threats, still calculating exit routes. It would take hours before his body understood the danger had passed. They were led through a series of corridors until they reached a large conference room that had been converted into a command center. Police radios chattered with updates. Officers moved with purpose. Monitors displayed security camera feeds from throughout the building. "Akoa, Woman in a police lieutenant's uniform approached them immediately. "Miss Johnson, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Barnes. Are you hurt?" "No," Emily said. "Thanks to him." She gestured to Dean. Lieutenant Barnes looked at him appraisingly. "Mr. Foster, we'll need a full statement, but first, I need to know what you observed. How many hostiles? What weapons? Any identifying information?" Dean recounted everything methodically. The initial breach, the coordinated movements, the radio communications, the attempted pursuit. Barnes listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Dean finished, she nodded. "You did good work tonight. Most civilians would have panicked or done something stupid. You kept her safe and provided us with actionable intelligence." "Just doing my job," Dean said. "That was more than just doing your job," Barnes said. "That was training." "Military?" Dean hesitated. He didn't like talking about his past. But this wasn't the time to be evasive. "Army," he said simply. "A long time ago." Barnes studied him for a moment, clearly sensing there was more to that story, but she didn't push. "Well, thank you for your service. And your help tonight." As Barnes moved away to coordinate with her team, Emily turned to Dean. They were standing near the windows now, the city lights twinkling beyond the glass like a galaxy laid flat. "A long time ago?" Emily repeated. "That wasn't just basic training. The way you moved, the way you handled that situation, that was special operations." Dean's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm just security now." "No," Emily said softly. "You're not." Before Dean could respond, one of the officers called out, "Lieutenant, you need to see this." Everyone turned toward the monitor. On the screen, security footage showed one of the ballroom balconies. The timestamp read 20 minutes earlier. The footage showed the moment when the attack began, but that wasn't what made the room go silent. The camera had captured something else. In the chaos as people scattered and screamed, one of the armed intruders had grabbed Emily and was dragging her toward the balcony edge. The angle was wrong for anyone inside to have seen it clearly, but the camera caught everything. Emily fighting back, the man lifting her, and then, from off-screen, Dean appearing at a dead sprint. What happened next made even the seasoned police officers inhale sharply. Dean didn't slow down. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the attacker with a flying tackle that sent both men crashing into the balcony railing. Emily stumbled backward. The attacker swung at Dean with a knife that glinted in the dim light. Dean deflected it, twisted the man's wrist until the knife clattered to the ground, then delivered 3 precise strikes that left the man unconscious. The entire encounter lasted 7 seconds. But that wasn't what made Emily's breath catch. As Dean stood and turned to check on her in the footage, his sleeve had been pushed up during the fight. And there, clearly visible on his forearm in the harsh security camera light, was a tattoo. Not just any tattoo, a skull with wings, a sword piercing through it, and beneath it, a single phrase in Latin. To oppresso, liber, to free the oppressed. The motto of Delta Force. Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She looked at Dean, who had gone very still, his eyes fixed on the monitor. "Rewind that," Lieutenant Barnes said. "Freeze it. Zoom in on his arm." The technician complied. The tattoo filled the screen, unmistakable. Barnes turned to Dean slowly. Her expression had changed. There was recognition there now, respect, maybe even a little awe. "Mr. Foster," she said carefully, "that's a very specific tattoo." Dean said nothing. His face was unreadable. "You don't just get ink like that for fun," Barnes continued. "That's earned. That's blood and sand and missions that never make the news." Emily stepped closer to Dean. "You were Delta Force." It wasn't a question. Dean finally met her eyes. For a moment, He looked like he might deflect again, might offer another vague non-answer. But something in Emily's expression, gratitude, understanding, made him decide otherwise. "I was," he said quietly. "A long time ago. I'm not that person anymore." "Except tonight you were," Emily said. "You saved my life. Multiple times. You moved like you were back in the field." "Muscle memory," Dean said. "That's all." "That's not all," Emily said firmly. "That kind of training doesn't just fade. You put yourself between me and armed men. You disarmed a hostile in the dark. You kept me calm and got me to safety. That wasn't muscle memory. That was who you are." Dean looked away, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what needed to be done." "You did what only a handful of people in this entire building could have done," Lieutenant Barnes interjected. "And you did it without backup, without proper equipment, and without hesitation." The room had gone quiet. Other officers were watching now, piecing together the story. The unassuming security guard in the black uniform wasn't what he appeared to be. He was something else entirely. Emily reached out and gently touched Dean's arm, just above where the tattoo was hidden beneath his sleeve. "Thank you," she said again. "I mean it. I wouldn't be standing here if not for you." Dean looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "You're welcome." For a moment, they just stood there, the chaos of the evening settling around them like dust after an explosion. And in that moment, Emily Johnson realized something important. The man standing in front of her, the quiet security guard with the Delta Force tattoo and the haunted eyes, wasn't just a hero from her past. He was someone she needed to know more about. Someone whose story was bigger than one night of courage. Someone who had walked away from a life of shadows and violence to raise a young one alone, only to find that violence had followed him anyway, and he had faced it without flinching. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of statements, debriefings, and controlled chaos. SWAT teams swept the building floor by floor, securing each level with methodical precision. By midnight, all 4 intruders had been apprehended, 3 unconscious and 1 surrendering after realizing he was surrounded. The hostages from the ballroom were released, shaken but unharmed. Paramedics treated minor injuries, mostly cuts from broken glass and twisted ankles from people running in heels. Dean sat in a corner of the command center, filling out paperwork while officers moved around him. His hand was steady as he wrote, his account of events clear and factual. He left out nothing except the emotions. The surge of adrenaline when he first heard the glass shatter. The cold calculation when he disarmed the first attacker. The brief moment of fear when he thought Emily might fall from the balcony edge. Those details were his alone dot across the room. Emily spoke with federal agents who had arrived to take over the investigation. Apparently, the kidnapping attempt involved corporate espionage at a level that triggered federal jurisdiction. The men who had stormed the gala weren't just hired muscle. They were professionals with connections to international criminal networks. One of them had already started talking, offering information in exchange for leniency. Emily handled the interrogation with remarkable composure. Dean watched her from across the room, noting how she answered every question without hesitation, how she maintained eye contact, how she refused to be intimidated even after everything she had been through. She was stronger than most soldiers he had served with. Around 2 in the morning, Lieutenant Barnes approached Dean with a cup of coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said. Handing it to him, "Thanks." Dean took a sip. It was terrible, the kind of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the previous administration, but it was hot and caffeinated. Barnes sat down in the chair next to him. "I spoke with my captain. He wants to commend you officially. You'll probably get a Civilian Valor Award or something similar." Dean shook his head. "That's not necessary. Maybe not necessary, but deserved." Barnes studied him for a moment. "Can I ask you something off the record?" "You can ask. Why security work?" "Someone with your background, your training, You could be doing private military contracting, executive protection at 10 times what you're making now, consulting work for 6 figures. Why are you working event security at corporate galas? Dean was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at his coffee, watching the surface ripple slightly as someone walked past. Because I have a daughter, he said finally. And she needs a father who comes home at night. Not one who disappears for months at a time to places he can't talk about, doing things he can't explain. Barnes nodded slowly. That's a good reason. It's the only reason that matters. Before Barnes could respond, one of the federal agents called out to her. She excused herself, leaving Dean alone with his thoughts. 20 minutes later, Emily finished her interview and made her way across the room to where Dean sat. She had been given a North Point Enterprises windbreaker to wear over her ruined dress, and someone had found her a pair of tennis shoes that were 2 sizes too big. She looked exhausted but alert. They're saying I can leave, she said. They'll need follow-up interviews, but the immediate crisis is over. Dean stood. That's good. You should get some rest. Will you walk me out? Of course. They made their way through the building, accompanied by 2 police officers who would escort Emily to a secure location for the night. Her home was considered compromised until a full security sweep could be completed. The federal agents had already arranged for her to stay at a protected hotel with round-the-clock security. As they walked through the lobby, Emily's phone buzzed repeatedly. News of the attack had broken, and apparently, every media outlet in the city wanted a statement. She ignored them all. When they reached the front entrance, a black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, clearly private security contractors of a much higher caliber than event staff. They nodded respectfully to Emily as she approached. She turned to Dean. I don't know how to thank you properly. You already did, Dean said. Multiple times. I mean, really, thank you. What you did tonight, most people wouldn't have. Most couldn't have. Dean shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. No, Emily said firmly. They wouldn't, and we both know it. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Not one of her standard corporate cards, but something more personal. She wrote something on the back and handed it to Dean. That's my personal number. Not my assistant, not my office, me. If you ever need anything at all, you call that number. Day or night. Dean took the card, turning it over in his hands. On the back, she had written, You gave me my life back. I don't forget that. Thank you, he said quietly. Emily smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. Take care of yourself, Dean Foster. And take care of that daughter of yours. Dean's eyebrows raised slightly. How did you know? You mentioned her earlier. On the balcony. You checked your phone before everything started. I saw your face change when you looked at the screen. That's the look of a parent checking on their young one. Emily's expression softened. I have a son. I know that look. Dean nodded. She's 9. Her name is Avery. That's a beautiful name. Emily glanced at the waiting SUV, then back at Dean. I mean what I said. About calling me. I have resources, connections. If you or Avery ever need anything, you use that number. I will, Dean said, though they both knew he probably wouldn't. Men like Dean Foster didn't ask for help. They gave it. Emily seemed to understand this. She extended her hand, and Dean shook it. Her grip was firm, her palm warm despite the cool night air. Goodbye, Dean. Goodbye, Ms. Johnson. Emily, she corrected. After everything tonight, I think we can skip the formalities. Emily, Dean repeated. She climbed into the SUV, and the door closed behind her with a solid thunk. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, its taillights disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Dean stood there for a moment, watching it go. Before turning and walking toward the parking structure where his own vehicle waited, His shift had ended 6 hours ago. But somehow, it felt like an entire lifetime had passed by the time Dean pulled into his driveway. The sun was beginning to rise. Golden light painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, chasing away the last remnants of night. His house was small but well-maintained. A 2-bedroom ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood where people knew their neighbors and kids still played in the streets. He unlocked the front door as quietly as possible and stepped inside. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Mrs. Calloway, his neighbor who watched Avery on the nights he worked late, had left a note on the kitchen counter. Avery went to bed at 9. Finished her homework. No problems. Call if you need anything. Hope work went well. Dean smiled tiredly. If only she knew. He walked down the hall to Avery's room and eased the door open. She was asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one arm draped over her favorite stuffed elephant. Her breathing was slow and steady, the peaceful sleep of someone who felt safe and loved. Dean stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her. This was why he did everything. Why he had left the service. Why he worked jobs that paid a fraction of what he could make elsewhere. Why he came home every night no matter how tired he was. Because she needed him. And he needed her. He pulled the door closed gently and made his way to his own room. As he undressed, he caught sight of himself in the mirror. The tattoo on his forearm stared back at him, stark and unmistakable even in the dim light. To oppresso liber. He hadn't thought about those words in years. Hadn't wanted to. They represented a life he had walked away from, a version of himself that no longer existed. Or so he had thought, but tonight had proven something he had been trying to ignore. You could leave that world, but that world never really left you. The training was permanent. The instincts were hardwired. And when the moment came, when lives were on the line, all of it came flooding back like it had never been gone at all. Dean pulled on a t-shirt and collapsed onto his bed. He was asleep within seconds, his body finally allowing itself to shut down now that the danger had passed. He dreamed of fire and darkness and the sound of helicopter blades cutting through desert air. He dreamed of faces he would never see again. 3 days passed before Dean heard from Emily Johnson again. He had returned to work the day after the gala incident. Though not at Sterling Plaza, that contract had ended rather dramatically. And while the security company he worked for had praised his actions, they had also gently suggested he might want to take a few days off. Dean had declined. Sitting at home gave him too much time to think, and thinking led to remembering. And remembering led to places he preferred not to go. Instead, he picked up a shift at Harborview Mall, walking the corridors in his security uniform, watching for shoplifters and helping lost children find their parents. It was boring, mindless work, which was exactly what he needed. Avery had noticed something was different. She was perceptive that way, able to read her father's moods even when he tried to hide them. Over breakfast on the third morning, she had looked at him with those serious brown eyes and asked, "Did something bad happen at work?" Dean had considered lying. It would have been easier. But he had promised himself a long time ago that he would never lie to his daughter. "Something difficult happened," he said carefully. "But it turned out okay. Everyone is safe. Did you help someone?" "I did." Avery had nodded, satisfied. "That's good. That's what heroes do." Dean had ruffled her hair gently. "I'm not a hero, kiddo. Just a dad doing his job." "Those can be the same thing," she had said with the absolute certainty that only 9-year-olds possess. Now, as Dean walked through the mall's food court, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw an unknown number on the screen. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call. But something made him reconsider. "This is Dean." "Mr. Foster. This is Catherine Wells. I'm the executive assistant to Emily Johnson. Miss Johnson would like to meet with you." If you're available. Dean stopped walking. Around him, shoppers flowed past like a river around a stone. Is everything all right? He asked. Everything is fine, Catherine assured him. Miss Johnson simply wanted to thank you properly for your actions the other night. Would you be available tomorrow afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? Dean thought about his schedule. He had a shift at the mall that ended at noon. I can do that. Where? North Point Enterprises headquarters. I'll send you the address and parking information. When you arrive, just give your name at the front desk. They'll be expecting you. All right, Dean said. I'll be there. After the call ended, Dean stood in the middle of the food court, feeling oddly uncertain. He didn't like being in the spotlight. Didn't like attention or recognition or public thank yous. He had learned long ago that the best operators were the ones nobody ever heard about. But Emily Johnson had been kind to him. Had treated him with respect even when she was terrified. The least he could do was accept her gratitude with grace. The next afternoon, Dean pulled his truck into the visitor parking lot at North Point Enterprises. The building was impressive, a sleek tower of glass and steel that rose 30 stories into the clear blue sky. He had put on his nicest clothes, a button-down shirt and dark slacks. Though he still felt underdressed for a place like this, the lobby was all marble and modern art, with a security desk that looked more sophisticated than some military installations he had seen. He gave his name to the guard, who checked his computer and nodded. Miss Johnson is expecting you, Mr. Foster. Take the elevators to the 28th floor. Her assistant will meet you there. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. When the doors opened, Catherine Wells was waiting. She was a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and an efficient smile. Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. Right this way, please. She led him through a corridor lined with awards and photographs of Emily at various events, ribbon cuttings, charity galas, technology conferences. In every picture, she looked confident and in control. It was hard to believe this was the same woman who had climbed down a building in a torn dress just 3 nights ago. Catherine stopped at a large wooden door and knocked twice before opening it. Miss Johnson, Mr. Foster is here. Thank you, Catherine. Send him in. Dean stepped into the office, and the door closed softly behind him. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Emily's desk was positioned to face the door, but she wasn't sitting behind it. Instead, she was standing near a seating area with comfortable chairs and a low table. She was dressed in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the powerful executive. But when she saw Dean, her professional demeanor softened into something more genuine. Dean, thank you for coming. Of course, he said. Suddenly aware of how out of place he felt in this environment, Emily seemed to sense his discomfort. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. They both sat, and for a moment, neither spoke. Emily seemed to be gathering her thoughts. I wanted to see you in person, she began, because what happened the other night has been weighing on me. Not the attack itself, though that was traumatic, but everything after. The realization of who you are. What you did. Dean shifted in his chair. I just reacted. Anyone with training would have done the same. That's what you keep saying, Emily said. But I don't think you realize how extraordinary it was. I've had security details before. Professional bodyguards with impressive credentials. And not one of them moved the way you did. Not one of them had that kind of presence under pressure. She leaned forward slightly. After you left, I did some research. I have resources, connections in various government circles. I made some calls. Dean's expression didn't change, but internally, he tensed. What kind of calls? The kind where you mention a name and a tattoo, and suddenly people get very quiet. The kind where decorated generals tell you in carefully neutral tones that they can neither confirm nor deny certain information, but that if the person you're asking about did exist in certain capacities, he would be someone you'd want on your side when everything went wrong. Emily's blue eyes held his steadily. You weren't just Delta Force, were you? You were something more. Something most people don't even know exists. Dean said nothing. His hands rested calmly in his lap, but his jaw had tightened slightly. I'm not asking you to tell me classified information, Emily continued. I'm just saying that I understand now. What I saw that night wasn't just training. It was years of operating in situations most people can't imagine. And then you walked away from all of that to raise your daughter alone. She needed me, Dean said quietly. That's all that matters. I know, Emily said. And that makes what you did even more remarkable. You could have stayed on that balcony with me. Could have hidden and waited for police. But you didn't. You put yourself in danger multiple times to protect someone you didn't even know. She reached for something on the table between them. It was a folder, thick with papers. This is everything the investigators have learned about the attack. The men who came after me weren't random criminals. They were hired by a rival corporation that wanted to derail the government contract I mentioned. But here's what's interesting. She opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed one of the attackers, the one Dean had disarmed in the hallway. But this photo was older, a military service record. This man, James Rourke, served in the Rangers. Two of the others had special forces backgrounds. These weren't amateurs. They were trained operators, and you neutralized them like they were nothing. Dean looked at the photograph, his expression unreadable. They made mistakes, got overconfident, or they ran into someone more skilled than they were, Emily countered. Someone who had operated at a level they never reached. She closed the folder and set it aside. Dean, I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. What you did saved my life, yes, but it also saved my company. That contract I'm working on, it's not just about money. It's about national security, communications infrastructure that will protect intelligence operations around the world. If those men had succeeded, if I had been killed or kidnapped, that project would have collapsed. Dean absorbed this information silently. So when I say thank you, Emily continued, I'm not just thanking you as someone whose life you saved. I'm thanking you on behalf of everyone who will be protected by the work we're going to complete. People who will never know your name. Operations that will succeed because of what you did. She stood and walked to her desk, retrieving something from a drawer. When she returned, she was holding a small wooden box. I had something made for you, she said, handing it to him. Dean opened the box carefully. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a challenge coin. But this wasn't a standard military coin. One side bore the North Point Enterprises logo. The other side showed an image of Sterling Plaza at night, with a single phrase engraved beneath it, De Oppresso Liber. Dean stared at the coin, his throat suddenly tight. I know you don't want recognition, Emily said softly. I know you'd prefer to remain invisible. But I needed you to have something. A reminder that what you did mattered. That you matter. That what you did mattered. That you matter. Dean picked up the coin, feeling its weight in his palm. It was heavier than most challenge coins, substantial, real. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. This means more than you know. Emily smiled. I had hoped it would. They talked for another hour after that. Emily told him about her son, a teenager who was passionate about robotics and terrible at keeping his room clean. Dean told her about Avery, about her love of reading and her determination to become a veterinarian. They talked about the challenges of single parenthood, the guilt of never having enough time, the fierce pride that came with watching your young one grow. It was easy conversation, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. When Dean finally stood to leave, Emily walked him to the door. I meant what I said, she told him. About calling if you need anything. I know you won't. Men like you never do. But the offer stands. Dean nodded. I appreciate that. As he turned to leave, Emily spoke again. Dean, one more thing. That security company you work for, they're good people, but they're not paying you what you're worth. If you ever want to do executive protection work, real work with real compensation, I know people who would hire you in a heartbeat. Dean considered this. I'll keep that in mind. But right now, I need to be home for Avery. She comes first. I understand, Emily said. But if that ever changes, you let me know. Dean left North Point Enterprises feeling lighter than he had in days. The coin rested in his pocket, a small weight that somehow felt significant. As he drove home through afternoon traffic, he thought about Emily's words, people who will never know your name. He had spent years operating in shadows, completing missions that would never be acknowledged, protecting people who would never know he existed. He had thought that part of his life was over, that he had earned the right to fade into obscurity, but maybe service didn't end just because you took off the uniform. Maybe it just changed shape. When he got home, Avery was in the backyard, drawing with sidewalk chalk. She looked up when she heard the door and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. Daddy, you're home. Dean hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of her small body against his. This was real. This was what mattered. I'm home, kiddo. I'm home. 2 weeks after their meeting at North Point Enterprises, Dean was working a routine shift at Harborview Mall when his phone rang. The number was Emily's personal line, the one she had given him that night. He answered immediately. Emily? Is everything okay? Dean, her voice was strained, urgent. I need your help. Something's happened. Dean's entire body tensed. He moved away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near an emergency exit. Talk to me. What's going on? It's my son, Elliot. He's 16. He was supposed to be home an hour ago from his robotics club meeting. He's not answering his phone. His location services show his phone is still at the school, but the building is locked and empty. Security cameras show him getting into a black sedan in the parking lot. Dean's mind immediately went to threat assessment mode. Did he know the people in the car? I don't know. I can't tell from the footage. But Dean, after what happened at the gala, after the investigation revealed how deep that conspiracy went, I'm terrified this is connected. What if someone took him to get to me? Have you called the police? They're on it, but they're treating it as a possible runaway situation because there was no sign of struggle. They don't understand the context. They don't know about the threats. Her voice cracked slightly. Dean, I'm scared. I need someone I trust. Someone who knows how to handle this kind of situation. Dean didn't hesitate. Send me the address of the school and the security footage. I'm on my way. He called his supervisor, claimed a family emergency, and was in his truck within 5 minutes. As he drove, Emily sent him everything she had. The security footage showed a teenage boy with dark hair and a backpack climbing into the back seat of a black Honda Accord. The angle wasn't good enough to see faces, but the body language didn't suggest force or coercion. Still, Dean knew better than to make assumptions. Teenagers could be manipulated, threatened, lured into situations they didn't understand. He arrived at the school. 20 minutes later, police were already there, taking statements from a few staff members who had been locking up the building. Emily's car, a silver BMW, was parked near the entrance. She was standing with 2 police officers, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. When she saw Dean, relief flooded her face. She excused herself from the officers and walked quickly toward him. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying. "Of course," Dean said. "Tell me everything you know." Emily explained that Elliot had been acting strange for the past week, Secretive, nervous. She had assumed it was. Typical teenage behavior. Maybe a girl or trouble with friends. Now she wasn't sure. The officers are saying he probably just went to hang out with friends and forgot to check in, Emily said. But Elliot's not like that. He always tells me where he is. Always. Dean pulled out his phone and looked at the security footage again, this time focusing on details. The car's license plate was partially visible. He could work with that. Do you have access to more cameras? He asked. Traffic cameras, nearby businesses, anything that might show which direction that car went. I can get them, Emily said. I have contacts with the city traffic management system. Good, do that. And send me Elliot's phone number. I want to try something. While Emily made calls, Dean dialed Elliot's number. It went straight to voicemail. Either the phone was off or the battery was dead. He tried twice more with the same result. Then he had another thought. He called his own contact, a former intelligence analyst he had worked with years ago who now did freelance cybersecurity work. Rodriguez, it's Foster. I need a favor. Dean Foster. I thought you retired to a quiet life of domestic bliss. I did. Now I need to unretire for an afternoon. I have a phone number. I need you to tell me if it's been active in the last 2 hours, and if so, where. That's illegal without a warrant, you know. I know. I'm asking anyway. It's a kid. 16 years old. Might be in danger. There was a pause. Then Rodriguez sighed. Send me the number. Give me 10 minutes. Dean hung up and turned back to Emily, who had just finished her own call. Traffic cameras picked up the Honda heading west on Interstate 7. Oh, I've got someone pulling footage from every intersection. Good. We'll have a trail. They worked together. Dean coordinating with Rodriguez while Emily leveraged her corporate resources to access camera networks most civilians couldn't touch. Within 30 minutes, they had tracked the Honda to a residential neighborhood on the west side of town. Rodriguez called back. The phone pinged off a cell tower in Brookside about 40 minutes ago. Then it went dark. Last known location was within a 3-block radius of Maple and 7th. Dean pulled up a map on his phone. The area was middle-class, family homes, nothing obviously suspicious. But it was also where the traffic cameras had lost sight of the Honda. We need to go there, Emily said. Now, Dean hesitated. The police should handle this. The police think my son ran away. They're not exactly mobilizing SWAT. Emily's voice was firm. I trust you, Dean, please. Dean looked at her, saw the desperation and fear in her eyes, and made a decision. Get in my truck. They drove to Brookside in tense silence. When they arrived at the intersection of Maple and 7th, Dean began driving slowly through the neighborhood, scanning every driveway, every parked car. There, Emily said suddenly, pointing. That's the Honda. Sure enough, parked in front of a modest 2-story house with blue siding, was the black Honda Accord from the security footage. The license plate matched. Dean pulled over 2 houses down. Stay here. Like hell I am, Emily said, already opening her door. Dean grabbed her arm gently. Emily, if this is what you think it is, if someone took Elliot to hurt you, walking up to that door could make things worse. Let me check it out first. He's my son. I know. And I will get him back safely. But you need to trust me. Emily stared at him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. If you're not back in 5 minutes, I'm calling SWAT myself. Fair enough. Dean approached the house carefully, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The front windows were covered with curtains, but he could see light inside. He could hear voices, faint but audible. He moved around to the side of the house, staying low. There was a window with a gap in the curtains. Dean peered inside. What he saw made him stop cold. Elliot Johnson was sitting at a kitchen table, very much alive and unharmed. Across from him sat an older man, maybe 60, with gray hair and weathered features. They were looking at photographs spread across the table. Both of them were smiling. Dean watched for another moment, his tactical brain processing the scene. No weapons visible. No signs of distress. Elliot looked comfortable, relaxed even. This wasn't a kidnapping. Dean walked back to his truck where Emily was pacing anxiously. He's fine. He's inside with an older man. They're looking at photographs. What? Who? I don't know, but Elliot's not in danger. Come with me. Let's find out what's going on. They walked to the front door together. Dean knocked firmly. The voices inside went quiet. Footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing the older man Dean had seen through the window. The man's eyes widened when he saw Emily. Emily Johnson? Who are you? Emily demanded. Where's my son, Mom? Elliot appeared behind the man, his face shocked. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? Elliot, you were supposed to be home an hour ago. You didn't answer your phone. I thought something terrible had happened. Elliot looked genuinely surprised. My phone died. I was going to call you from Mr. Holt's landline in a few minutes. I didn't mean to worry you. Mr. Holt? Emily looked at the older man, confusion replacing panic. Who is Mr. Holt? The older man stepped back, gesturing for them to come inside. Please come in. I think we need to have a conversation. They entered the house, which was modest but tidy. The kitchen table was indeed covered with photographs, old ones from the look of them. Military portraits, group shots in desert fatigues, images of helicopters and bases that Dean recognized immediately as deployment photos. My name is Jasper Holt, the older man said. I served in the Army with your father, Mrs. Johnson. We were in the same unit for 3 years. Emily's expression shifted from anger to shock. My father? Thomas Johnson, yes. Jasper gestured to the photographs. These are from our time in Iraq, 2004 to 2007. Emily moved closer to the table, her hands trembling as she picked up one of the photos. It showed a young man in his 20s, wearing desert camouflage and smiling at the camera. Her father. Elliot, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How did you find him? Elliot looked uncomfortable. I've been researching Grandpa online. You never talk about him, and I wanted to know more. I found Mr. Holt's name in some military records. He lives here in the city, so I messaged him. He invited me over to share stories. I know I should have asked you first, Mrs. Johnson, Jasper said apologetically. But your son was so eager to learn about his grandfather. I thought it would be good for him to know the man Thomas was. Emily sank into a chair, still holding the photograph. Dean watched her carefully, seeing emotions play across her face too quickly to name. My father died when I was 12, Emily said finally. Combat deployment. I barely remember him. My mother never wanted to talk about it. She remarried and moved on, and I grew up barely knowing anything about the man who gave me life. He was a good man, Jasper said gently. One of the best soldiers I ever served with. Brave, loyal, always looked out for his team. He talked about you constantly. Carried your picture everywhere. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I don't have any of his things. My mother got rid of everything after he died. Said it hurt too much to keep reminders around. Jasper reached into a box beside the table and pulled out a folded flag. He would have wanted you to have this. It's his service flag. I kept it all these years, hoping someday I'd find you. Emily took the flag with shaking hands. She held it against her chest, tears streaming down her face now. Elliot moved to her side, putting his hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted to know where I came from. Emily pulled her son into a fierce hug. You didn't upset me, sweetheart. You gave me a gift I didn't know I needed. Dean stood back, giving them space. He understood now why Elliot had been secretive. The boy had been searching for his own identity, for the legacy that had been kept from him. And in doing so, he had given his mother back a piece of herself she had lost. After a long moment, Emily looked up at Jasper. "Thank you for keeping his memory alive. Would you tell me about him? Tell me everything?" "I would be honored," Jasper said. They spent the next 2 hours in that kitchen, Jasper sharing stories while Emily and Elliot listened with rapt attention. He told them about missions and downtime, about Thomas Johnson's terrible sense of humor and his homesickness for his little girl. He showed them letters Thomas had written but never sent, photographs of birthdays celebrated in the desert, stories of brotherhood and sacrifice. Dean sat quietly in the corner, listening but not intruding. He understood the importance of what was happening. Emily was reclaiming a part of her history, and Elliot was discovering roots he hadn't known existed. As the evening grew late, Emily finally stood to leave. She hugged Jasper tightly. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." "Your father would be proud of you," Jasper said. "Everything you've accomplished. The woman you've become." Emily smiled through fresh tears. "I hope so." As they walked back to Dean's truck, Elliot carrying the box of photographs and letters Jasper had given them, Emily turned to Dean. "I'm sorry I panicked. I should have trusted that Elliot was okay." "You're his mother," Dean said simply. "You're supposed to panic. That's the job." Emily laughed, a real laugh. "I suppose it is." They drove back to Emily's house in companionable silence. When Dean pulled into her driveway, Emily touched his arm. "Thank you for coming when I called. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have figured it out," Dean said. "You're stronger than you think." "Maybe," Emily said. "But it helps knowing I don't have to figure everything out alone." Dean nodded. He understood that feeling all too well. As he drove home later that night, Dean thought about fathers and legacies, about the marks we leave on the world and the people we leave behind. Thomas Johnson had died doing what he believed was right, serving his country and protecting his brothers. He had left behind a daughter who barely knew him, but carried his strength in her bones. Dean glanced at his phone, at the photo of Avery that served as his wallpaper. Whatever legacy he left, he wanted it to be measured in moments like these. In being there when people needed him. In showing up, even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable. In being the kind of father his daughter could be proud of, whether she ever knew his full story or not. When he got home, Avery was already asleep. Dean kissed her forehead gently, then sat in his living room with the challenge coin Emily had given him. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight. Do oppresso, LIBER. Free the oppressed. He had thought he was done with that mission when he left the service. But maybe it had never really ended. Maybe it had just evolved into something different, something quieter but no less important, helping a CEO escape armed attackers, reuniting a mother with her son's history, being present for a young one who needed a father more than she needed a hero. All of it mattered. All of it was service. And Dean Foster was exactly where he needed to be. Over the following weeks, Dean's life settled into a new rhythm. He continued his security work, but Emily kept in touch, calling occasionally to share updates about Elliot or simply to talk. Their friendship grew naturally, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to carry heavy responsibilities alone. One afternoon, Emily called with an unusual request. "Dean, I have a proposition for you. North Point is expanding our executive protection division. We need someone to train our security teams, someone who understands real threat assessment, not just textbook scenarios. The position would be part-time, flexible hours. You could work around Avery's schedule." Dean hesitated. "Emily, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not qualified to teach." "You're more qualified than anyone I've ever met," Emily countered. You don't need a fancy credential. You need experience, instinct, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. You have all three in abundance. Dean thought about Avery, about the essay she had written calling him brave, about wanting to show her that helping others mattered more than titles or recognition. What would the schedule look like? He asked. 3 days later, Dean stood in front of 12 security professionals at Northpoint's training facility. They were younger than him, confident, some clearly skeptical about learning from a man who worked mall security. Dean didn't try to impress them with credentials or stories. Instead, he taught them what he knew: how to read a room, how to identify threats before they materialized, how to protect someone without making them feel suffocated by security. He taught them that the best protection was invisible, that ego got people killed, and that sometimes the most important skill was knowing when not to act. By the end of the first session, the skepticism had vanished. One trainee, a former police officer named Brandon Ellis, approached Dean afterward. "Sir, I've been doing security work for 8 years. I thought I knew what I was doing. But watching you break down that scenario, the way you see patterns and anticipate movements, that's something different. That's mastery." Dean felt uncomfortable with the praise. "It's just pattern recognition. You'll develop it with time." "Maybe," Brandon said, "but I'd rather learn it from you." Word spread quickly through Belmont Heights security community about the training program at Northpoint. Dean's sessions became highly sought after, not because he advertised or promoted himself, but because the people he trained became noticeably better at their jobs. Security contractors who had taken his courses started getting hired for higher profile assignments. They handled situations with a calm professionalism that stood out in an industry often dominated by intimidation and aggression. Emily noticed the change too. At corporate events, the security teams moved differently. They communicated better. They prevented problems before they escalated. And when she asked them what had changed, the answer was always the same: Dean Foster's training. One evening, Emily invited Dean to dinner at her home. It was casual, just her, Elliot, Dean, and Avery, who had become fast friends with Elliot, despite their age difference. He treated her like a little sister, patiently explaining robotics concepts and letting her help with his projects. Over pasta and laughter, Emily raised her glass. "I want to propose a toast to Dean Foster, who saved my life," and then quietly proceeded to make everyone around him better at theirs. Dean shifted uncomfortably, but Avery beamed with pride. "That's my dad. He's always helping people." Later, as they cleared dishes, Elliot pulled Dean aside. "Mr. Foster, I've been thinking about joining the military after high school, following in my grandfather's footsteps. What do you think?" Dean considered his words carefully. "Service is honorable, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Not because of legacy or pressure, but because you genuinely want to serve something bigger than yourself." "Did you want to serve?" Elliot asked. "I did," Dean said honestly. "And I'm grateful for that time. But I'm also grateful it led me here, to this life, to Avery. Every choice has consequences, good and bad. You just have to decide which consequences you can live with." Elliot nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, sir. That helps." As Dean drove home that night with Avery asleep in the passenger seat, he realized something had shifted. He was no longer running from his past or hiding from who he had been. He was integrating it, using those hard-earned skills to build something meaningful in the present. 6 months after the Sterling Plaza incident, the Belmont Heights Police Department held its annual Valor Awards ceremony. Dean had been invited, but assumed it was a formality. He attended in a borrowed suit, with Avery beside him in her favorite dress. When his name was called, Dean was genuinely surprised. He walked to the stage where Chief of Police Richard Tate stood with a framed certificate. "Dean Foster," Chief Tate announced, "demonstrated extraordinary courage and skill. During a hostage situation at Sterling Plaza, his actions directly saved the life of Emily Johnson and prevented what could have been a tragic loss of life. It is my honor to present him with the Civilian Medal of Valor. The room erupted in applause. Dean accepted the medal with a quiet thank you, but as he turned to leave the stage, Emily appeared from the side entrance. She was dressed formally, and she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Lieutenant Barnes, several of the officers who had responded that night, and to Dean's shock, Jasper Holt. Emily approached the microphone. "If I may say a few words, Chief?" "Of course, Ms. Johnson." Emily faced the audience. "6 months ago, a man I barely knew put himself between me and armed attackers. He did it without hesitation, without thought for his own safety. But what I've learned since that night is that wasn't unusual for Dean Foster. That's simply who he is." She gestured to Jasper. "This is Jasper Holt. He served with my late father. He told me something that I think is important for everyone to hear. He said the best soldiers aren't the ones who seek glory. They're the ones who do what's necessary, help who needs helping, and then go home to the people they love." Emily looked directly at Dean. Dean Foster embodies that principle. He could leverage his background and experience for personal gain, but instead, he chooses to raise his daughter with integrity and teach others how to protect people. That's not just valor. That's character. The applause was thunderous. Avery stood, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt, tears of pride streaming down her face. Dean felt his own eyes sting. He nodded to Emily, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. This was recognition he hadn't sought, but couldn't deny meant something profound. Later that night, Dean sat on his back porch while Avery slept inside, the medal resting on the table beside him. Emily had texted, "You deserved every word. Thank you for letting people see who you really are." He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the wars he had fought, the brothers he had lost, the decision to walk away from that life when Avery needed him. For years he had wondered if leaving had been cowardice, if choosing peace over continued service made him less than what he had been. But now he understood. Service hadn't ended when he took off the uniform. It had transformed. Every person he trained carried forward the lessons. Every time he chose patience over anger, presence over absence, he was still fighting, just on a different battlefield. The back door opened quietly. Avery stepped out, wrapped in her blanket. "Can't sleep, kiddo?" Dean asked. "I'm too happy," she said simply, climbing into his lap despite being almost too big for it. "Everyone was clapping for you, Daddy. Everyone knows you're a hero now." Dean held her close. "I'm not a hero, Avery. I'm just a dad who tries his best." "That's what makes you a hero," she said with absolute certainty. "Heroes don't need capes or medals. They just need to show up and care about people." Dean kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the steady warmth of her against his chest. This moment, right here, was everything that mattered. "I love you, kiddo," he whispered. "Love you more," she replied. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. The night was quiet, peaceful. Somewhere in the city, Emily was putting Elliot to bed, probably having a similar conversation about legacy and love. Somewhere, security professionals Dean had trained were keeping people safe. Somewhere, the ripples of one man's choices were spreading outward in ways he would never fully see. Dean Foster had walked through fire, literally and figuratively. He had served in shadows and saved lives in secret. And now, he was building something that would outlast any medal or mission. A daughter who understood that true courage meant being kind when it was easier to be hard, present when it was easier to hide, and loving even when love required sacrifice. That was enough. That was everything. And as Avery's breathing slowed and she drifted back to sleep in his arms, Dean finally allowed himself to believe it. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Up next. You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.